Hey everyone, this is Brian Funk, and I want to tell you about my Music Production Club, which is a subscription service that gets you a steady flow of new music production tools right into your email inbox. Currently, you're hearing the latest addition to the club, the Mode Audio Music Production Club Sample Pack. Mode Audio has kindly supplied us with 350 megabytes of samples from some of their greatest sample packs. I just grabbed a few of these samples and strung them together for this intro. It's a really awesome selection of sounds, and that's included with your membership, along with all kinds of other Ableton Live packs. I have tutorials, I have templates, the What Bob Ross Teaches Us About Music Production book, and plenty more. It also gets you in our Discord community, so you can reach out and talk with like-minded producers. You get the Music Production Club samples folder, and there's even discounts to all sorts of really cool companies around the internet that'll help add lots of color and sounds to your music production projects. That's the Music Production Club. Check it out at brianfunk.com/MPC. And be sure to head over to modeaudio.com. Right now they're running their 30% off summer sale, where you can get sounds like the ones you hear in this background music. They're a really awesome site, and I'm really proud to have them help sponsor the Music Production Club with these great samples. So go to modeaudio.com, enjoy their 30% off summer sale, and join the Music Production Club. Now on to the show. Hello and welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. On today's show, I have Chris from 80's Stallone. And 80's Stallone has been a fun piece of music in my life. Very cool, like synth wave. I mean, I don't know. I think, honestly, when you just say 80's Stallone, it kind of just captures the genre of music so perfectly. If you just picture Sylvester Stallone in an action sequence in some movie from the 80s, that is the sound that I think you have particularly nailed, Chris. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Brian.
Yeah, you too. Like I said, I've really been enjoying your music for a long time now. It's great for a party. It's great for a good hang. It's great for working out. It's exciting, and it's got a lot of like really cool synthesizer sounds, drum machines. Captures that. I saw a comment on YouTube that I actually thought was like kind of funny that says it well. It said, "This song captures the American kick-ass, world-saving mentality of the 80s era." And I think that's a nice way to put it. Yeah. So I thought maybe I could ask you, because you're pretty mysterious on the internet. There's not a lot out there. If you might tell us a little about yourself, what you do, your background in music.
I think I've consciously kept it that way and left this sort of Stallone thing do the work. I'm not that interesting, really, And then I've worked with all different music over the years, collected records since I was a kid, listened to all sorts. And then I just decided to keep it really electronic, no samples, everything me. And I just had some old drum machines, some synths. I started with Reason. Well, no, I started with Amigas and STs, an old program called Quartet, which was like a 4-track thing. You had to paste in like crotchets and quavers, and that was it was hard work. So, and then we had an Emacs, all various softwares over the years. I was in punk bands, rock bands, funk bands. And then I kind of just got to a point where I said, let's just do it yourself, like literally just me. And that's when I accumulated more and more software, hardware. Like I say, Reason, Acid was the sort of first things I was using. Then I switched to Live, and it became a lot more. I could do more with audio and MIDI and all sorts. It was just a lot easier. Reason never really sent MIDI out, I don't think, in the early days, did it? So it was all software based. Same with Acid, that was more audio based. And I didn't really know how to use VSTs in them days, whereas Reason was an all-in-one package, weren't it? The VSTs were their own. You couldn't import the old or bring VSTs in the old versions. And then I moved to Live, and then it opened up all sorts. We used Cubase as well originally at one point. I used to do the vocals in Cubase and do the music in Reason, and sort of try and bodge them together in some way. Yeah,
cool. Nice. And you said you started in like punk bands, rock bands, funk bands?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I was a bass guitarist, so
Nice.
we like the school bands and things like that, and played in some hardcore bands. That was good fun.
Yeah.
Short 10-minute sets.
Right.
Yeah.
Pure aggression and energy.
It's always
right?
harder to keep bands together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love it. Bad Brains, them kind of guys, Minor Threat. You know, that 80s hardcore sound. And I got into a lot of Scandinavian hardcore as well. That was about in the 80s. Okay. That was pretty cool stuff. I couldn't even understand what they're singing, but like you say, it was the energy.
Yeah, you feel it, right?
And drum and bass. Drum and bass was another big thing for me, because I heard the metal aggression in that, sort of like the big bass sublines and things like that. I was heavily into that, collecting records, playing on pirate radio and things. And then, I just thought I'd chill it out and make some disco. It's what you can make that stuff quite easily. I tried to make Detroit electro, but I'm not from Detroit, so that didn't really sound too good. And electro's hard to make. Real old 80s electro is really hard, or for me.
Well, I mean, I can actually notice, coming from somewhat similar backgrounds, rock and punk rock. I can hear the connection between a lot of like hardcore punk music and things like drum and bass and even dubstep type stuff. Like drum and bass so fast. Boom, pow, boom, pow. It's very like punk rock. And then the like halftime breakdowns of hardcore music you hear in a lot of other genres, a lot of like that dubstep that was coming out. It's, I see the connection, so I can definitely understand where one would come from that, and then find the energy and the pacing of the music like enjoyable. Yeah.
That's what I tried to do with the 80s Stallone stuff, was keep it on that sort of like 120, even slower sometimes, 128, make it like a disco 4/4 thing, like the heartbeat.
Yeah,
take it back to that level, because not everyone enjoys that fast, heavy stuff. I love it, but yeah,
but I guess you dial it back a little bit, then you got like more of a groove to kind of feel and get into.
You got more space.
Yeah,
like the funk is what you leave out, isn't it, sometimes?
Yes, exactly. I think maybe it was like, I know it's not considered really funk, but like maybe it was Miles Davis that talked about the space between the notes being the most important part, the notes I don't play.
Yeah, that's it. And that's kind of what I tried to do with some of the 80s Stallone stuff. You listen to it, it's quite simple.
So you mentioned getting into like some drum machines and hardware and stuff like that, VSTs. Was there anything in particular that sort of helped propel you, helped get you going?
My first drum machine I got when I was playing bass, it was a DR-110. You know, the old Boss? The poor man's 808.
Right.
I used to love that thing. It was like a I think it's just got sync out. You can mod them. But that's I've still got that to this day. But I've got a big collection now of bits and pieces and noise boxes, drum machines, synths. I notice a sequential behind you. I'm into them. I haven't got any old or new, but I've got a lot of the Dave Smith stuff. I started buying that because I started buying the newer stuff rather than the vintage, because less to fix, or, less problems.
Yeah, they tend to go and have a mind of their own as they get older and older. This is the newer Prophet 6 that came out, and it's actually,
that's nice.
Yeah, it's really cool because they've baked in the imperfections on a knob. They have a knob, it's called Slop.
Yeah.
And actually recently they did a firmware update where it's they call it vintage now. And I think that is more connected to the Prophet 5, which they've started reproducing again. And it's just,
Yep.
it just takes it and like kind of ruins the timing and tuning of everything the more you crank it up. And I love it. I mean,
Cool.
it's always at least halfway when I use it, just because it's amazing.
Right.
Like every time you play a note, it sounds different. It's never the same, like a real
Yep.
synth, you know. But when you put it all the way off, it's so consistent. It loses some of that like life.
Yeah. Yeah. I've played one. I played the OB6 as well. I've got a Prophet 12. I love that thing, but that's in the cupboard somewhere. I got a Pro 2. That's probably my favourite of the newer stuff. I've got Mofo, Tetra. I love his stuff. I've got Mono Evolver. That was good fun. Like the keyboard one. I do like their stuff. But I've got loads, not like, but sometimes I only use one thing. I'll try and work that synth and get as much out of it as I can. I do love hardware. But VSTs are just as good. Samples, it's all relevant.
Yeah. So that's an interesting approach. You like to sometimes focus on just one piece of gear and see what you can make out of that?
Yep. Yeah, there's bits of that. Sometimes I'll mix the digital and the analog worlds together. Sometimes I'll use tape. Depends on what mood I'm in, how I feel that day. Sometimes I'll just grab something. I don't leave anything plugged in. I'll just maybe wire a few things up and use them. I like a lot of the old rack stuff. And some stuff I've never really used. I've just kept it because I know it's a good piece of gear. You know, Waldorf Pulse. I've never really used it. I know it's got like a really heavy bass sound. It's like a poor man's Moog.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's that same setup, really.
So that's cool. You don't like to keep everything ready to go. So that, I guess, forces you to select your palette, so to speak, of sounds, and then you're kind of locked into that.
Definitely. Definitely. And sometimes I'd buy them out of Vogue synths because they were cheaper. So I used to scour eBay and say, oh, I'm going to buy that. I bought a JD800 and no one wanted them. D50. No one really wanted them. And then they became the sort of sought after pieces. Some things I missed, MC202s, and they just shot up in money. I can remember when Junos were 300 quid or, you know, now they're like stupid money. But again, I thought of the upkeep and the voice chips go in and things like that. So that's kind of why I went for the newer stuff. I think we're really spoiled today because there's just so much gear. There's some beautiful pieces being made and by all sorts of companies all over the world.
Yeah, that's one of the big challenges, I think, in making music these days is there's just so much. And even if you just stay inside your computer, you have, you know, more than you can ever go through, honestly. You'll never get through all of those samples and presets and actually make use of them.
No, never. Yeah. And that's where I think the limiting yourself is helpful sometimes. But then also having that vast palette so you can just grab something and see how that sounds on that day. I got a Lyra 8. Do you know those? The Soma things?
No.
I bought one of those when they first came out. Yeah, the Lyra 8. Soma Laboratories, or they're doing the Pulsar now and things like that. That was good because you just have to do everything by ear. And it comes up with some really wild stuff. I bought into that early. I got like number 35 and they're all hand built and I was pretty proud of that. Yeah, I like the old Yamaha keyboards just as much as a Oberheim, or do you know?
Yeah.
It's what you get out of it.
There was a time when all of that stuff, right? Like just nobody wanted them anymore. And then I don't know what happened. I'd like to know what the shift was that just made people say, "Hey, let's let's start buying this old hardware, the synths and all these old broken things.
Yeah, I think coming from the punk and that sort of rock scene, where that you'd be scared to take a keyboard on stage, or it was that sort of 80s hair metal band thing. And then they were sort of outlawed in the 90s, weren't they? It was only like 9 Inch Nails and a few people doing that sort of digital thing.
Yeah.
And then, it, like you say, it all shifted back. It's gone full circle. And yeah, I like the Rumplers and some of the out of vogue things. But like you say, today, everything's game.
Yeah. Yeah, it is funny that there's something shifted, something somewhere. Because you're right, like there was certain, like in the 90s when I was growing up playing in bands, you know, like you wouldn't bring a synth or a drum machine out. That was just
No,
unheard
never.
of.
DX7, yeah.
I even used to have like in my own head,
Now they're fighting over each other to get them.
Yeah. I had in my head this idea like I don't like music with drum machines. Like drum machines aren't cool. They have no soul. You know, all these things people would always say. Unwittingly though, I was listening to a lot of music that had drum machines in it. I just wasn't smart enough to realize it. But there was sort of just this like rule, like law or something. Like no good. And it's just funny how much that has changed. And me, I like, you know, you can see I've obviously broken that rule in my adulthood.
I think as well, a lot of it was disco and the live music scene rejecting a lot of that stuff because it was taking people's jobs. You could just put a drum machine on a disco record. No one knew it was a Linn drum or, you know?
Yeah.
And some of them guys could program them so good. And then later on, we've just all... I think techno and that whole 90s era changed a lot of that as well. But then there was people against it, the repetitive music and stuff, because they weren't zoning into it, or... And the anti-disco sort of thing at some point.
Yeah, that was a pretty amazing thing. I was watching, there's a documentary on the Bee Gees on HBO, and they have a part where they had like, I think it was in Chicago, where they had like the baseball stadium open so people could burn their disco records. And it was like a controlled riot, basically, against disco, brought on by
Disco
this rock
sucks.
radio station. Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
Yeah. So passionately against everything it stood for. And I guess that's where we get a lot of musical movements happen that way. But I can't really think of any other genre, really, that was just totally like rejected, like no more of this. We're not allowing it.
Yeah, and I think Europe brought a lot of that back, maybe. Although you had like Chicago House, you had Detroit Techno, that influenced so much of Germany and Europe. And then they started making their own stuff. It's like drum and bass. At one point, you could only be from England and make it. And then those boundaries dropped later when the more exciting acts came, like getting signed by those British labels. It's just one of those things. It's a demographic thing, I think, and I think the internet changed a lot of that, in my opinion. That it opened up.
Yeah, that's definitely true. The time from when music would get from one spot to another is almost eliminated at this point.
Yeah.
The scenes just pop up and take over the world.
Yeah, whereas in those punk days, dance days, it would be a certain area would have their own sound, you know?
Yeah.
Or you'd get those clubs.
Right, the places. Yeah, I wonder if that's a consequence, something we won't see as much anymore moving forward in our kind of like small village the world has become.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's better for it. It's definitely better musically. You know, would we have been talking in the 80s?
Yeah, definitely not on Zoom.
No.
Yeah,
No.
we're stringing it together today in 2021, so not on a futuristic video phone call, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then the state of the world at the moment is drawn people back to doing things differently again. We progress really quick,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah,
The tours haven't been happening and stuff like that.
right.
It's been
Yeah, a
really
lot of
hard
rethinking.
for a lot of musicians.
Yeah,
Yeah. But we've adapted quick,
yeah.
and
It's
some
been.
good things have come from it.
I think so. I think in the end, creativity does sort of always win. I mean, it's
Yeah.
obviously artists have adapted so much with the record sales not really being any source of actual revenue for the most part. So touring was the big thing. And then we take touring away, and now it's like, all right, we got to figure something out. But I'm sure, and
Yeah.
I think we'll start to see it real soon. People starting to release stuff that they've been coming out with and working on since they've been at home.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of my stuff is been made 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I've been sitting on so much back catalogue. I lost, I don't know how much, because of a hard drive crashing.
Really?
But then years ago, you would have had tapes deteriorating, and it's just, we just move on. And
Yeah. Yeah. I've had the hard drive thing happen too. I always try to tell people, make sure you back it up. And if you have one, you have none. If you need at least two backups,
yeah,
play it safe.
yeah. I was like that with my records, so it's like a hip hop thing. I always keep two copies of things, like a scratch DJ or a battle DJ, just in case. And now, if you want to listen to that old album, you can try and remember. You're looking through 6 hard drives. You just used to get the record off the shelf or the tape or the CD. Strange. But then you just go on YouTube.
That's true too. You can just search it. But I do find a lot of like these sort of like dark corners of my hard drive every once in a while where I have stuff saved, like, because it's not like physical things where I can see like my pile of books or records or whatever are all
Yeah.
right there. But in the computer, you can have these like folders that you never look at for so long, and
Yeah.
and you know they're like covered in digital cobwebs, and you you don't see the physical presence of it, and that can be tricky, and that's another way you can lose material just by mislabeling and misplacing it.
I'm one of the world's worst for that. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Or naming them all the same thing, and yeah. How many audio ones have you got? You know?
Oh God.
Yeah.
If you don't name your track when you start.
Yes, but some people are really organized.
Yeah. I do appreciate that Ableton has now given you like a timestamp on your files in the newer versions.
Yes.
That's a big help.
Yeah, definitely. I think they've done great with that software. They know exactly what they're doing and what the sort of musician wants. And that's opened a lot of music up as well. People to be like express what they want to do is having that software that's that user friendly. I was using Reason for a long time, and like I say, it didn't even have VSTs in it. And I think version 4 I got up to before I really switched to Ableton. It was hard work with Ableton for me at first, but then I worked out how to just send a MIDI and then record the audio back in. So I used to have all my synths set up, MIDI channel 1, 2, and then I'd solo and mute stuff on the desk. And that was how I first started doing it. And just the ability to mess around with the audio and stuff. Then I learned the plugins a lot more, you know, the operators and all of that sort of stuff, their own stuff. And yeah, it's just fun to use. And so many different things you can do in it. Clip launching but I'm up to the latest version now. I'm still getting my head around some of the new methods and things. I even thought I'm going back to 10 or 9 or whatever it was. I don't really update things a lot. I keep them really like what I know.
Right.
But yeah, it's a great thing. I want to get push. I
Mm.
think that would help my workflow a bit. But you can always have, you can sometimes have too many toys, you know?
Yeah, you can. I'm a big fan of push myself, especially as a guitar player, and probably as a bass player, you would appreciate it
Mm.
too, because if you look at the pads horizontally as strings on your guitar, you can, when you set it to
Ah,
chromatic mode, you have the same intervals, so it's fourths. You know, like like you can make if you're in the key
gotcha.
of E, that first row starts on E, and then it's like your E string. The next row would be A, and so on. Whoops. And all those familiar chord shapes that work on guitar are there. The octave is, up 2 rows and over 2 buttons, just like on a guitar, up 2 strings and
Gotcha.
over 2 frets. And I'm not a keyboard player really, so it's a much more familiar way of working, and the integration with the software is great. You can literally kind of set the computer aside a bit and just kind of stay in there for much of the process. But I
Yeah,
think,
I've played with it in the shop a little bit and just
hmm,
knew straight away. It's really intuitive, like,
yeah, I'm like you in a lot of ways, that playing in bands, I still play in a band, but um, I wanted to not have to rely on that. And after a band broke up that I was pretty invested in, it was like, like I need to figure out a way to be able to do my stuff without having to rely on that. So that really started to come together for me once I got into live. I was using Logic, which I liked a lot, but I was rewiring Ableton Live into Logic, and I found myself after a while
yeah.
doing everything in Live. And I'm like, why am I still opening Logic? So I just kind of buckled down on Live and made sure I learned it really well. And it's been such a helpful tool in the songwriting process. And of course, recording, but coming up with ideas. Yeah.
I'd like to say it's easy. It's not, but
Hmm.
it's user friendly. Let's
Yeah.
say that it's really helpful, you know. And
I
there's
always
not a
felt
lot
like
you can't do in it.
Yeah, and I always felt like I was making music like in spite of the software. Like I was like fighting against it to make my music. But when I got live, I felt like it was helping
Yeah,
me.
yeah, inspiring you and stuff. But
Yeah.
that's kind of what I done with 80's Stallone as well. So I thought the drum machine's the drummer, that
Hmm.
synth's the bass player. So I was writing it sort of like that. So it's quite minimal tracks on a lot of
Hmm.
my early stuff. I'd think like that's the bass line, and that's all the bass line can do. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? Like using
Yeah.
them like monophonic and thinking of it like a band.
Oh,
So
that's
some of
cool.
my early tracks were written with that in mind.
Did you have specific pieces of gear playing those roles?
I would change them, but I'm trying to think probably when I had less hardware, but I just kept buying more, more, more. It's that hunger for like more and
Yeah.
more technology, and but you kind of need to do that sometimes to work out what works for you or what you like, you know. Well, I'd sort of program the drums like a drummer sometimes.
Hmm.
Every track's sort of different, but I did sort of think of it like that a little bit, like Italo Disco, even like an 8 track or something like that. You've only got a certain amount rather than using 300 tracks, which you can do in Ableton. But I'd kind of think, well, that's the bass line, that's the top line, that's that, and just play around with them as such. And I always kind of try to make more Italo Disco, sort of an electro, but it became more Italo eventually. And then the whole synthwave thing popped up, and I thought, I don't even really know what this is. They just started tagging my music as that, and Outrun and all these other sort of genres were popping up. I was just messing around trying to make sort of like funky disco or like Italo disco.
Hmm. Yeah, and that definitely seems to have caught on with the synthwave movement, the kind of like retro thing that I guess early to mid 2010s, right? That started popping up a
Yeah,
lot. Probably
yeah.
timed with the
There's a lot of
rise
guys
in
on the internet.
prices. Yeah, probably timed in the rise in prices of used analog synths, right?
Definitely, definitely. There was some favourable ones there, like Judo 106s and
Hmm.
certain things everyone wanted, but there was a lot of forgotten stuff as well. You know,
Mhm.
you could pick some of them sequential things up for quite cheap, like sequential 600, which it had a lot of glitches and things.
Mm.
Yeah, I kind of went for a lot of the newer stuff because now we're really spoiled. We were saying about it earlier, but back then there was not much stuff. Dave Smith was making a few things, the Mofo, and there was like not a lot of new stuff. The Polyevolver and things like that were
Mm.
crazy. Remember the rack one? He made a rack version of that. And then they were discontinuing it and stuff. There wasn't many companies then, whereas now you've got hundreds. And then Eurorack really like
Mm.
started to come through with a lot more sort of DIY people. Originally, it was just Dofa.
Yeah, there's definitely an abundance of tools. I like your approach of limitations, really, I guess, where you've got these certain elements that you know that need to be there, and you're avoid. Did you have like a set limit? Is there like only 8 tracks or 16 or something, or was it um, kind of
I
on
only
a?
had a 16-track mixer
Mhm.
originally and a sound card with 2 inputs. So I'd run everything off the desk. Because that's what I used to do with mates of mine years ago. We was using an old EMU Emax and an Amiga, an ST to do all the sequencing and
Right.
basically
Wow.
just using the Emacs and other things. And then fast forward 10 years or whatever, then I sort of redone that thing, what I learnt then of using the desk, a little bit like dub reggae, where
Hmm.
you'd do some effect sends and things like that. But I'm kind of lazy sometimes, or the software's allowed me to be lazy years later because you can treat things after. You couldn't back then. You had to do live mix stands and play live and things like that.
Right. You don't have to commit as much these days.
Limitations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've still got 4 tracks. I used to like using them. It's the problem with the
Mhm.
tape hiss and things like that. People ain't
Right.
accustomed to it these days. We all used to love that.
Yeah, the 4 track always had this magic to it. Of course, the noise, but after you did a few tracks, and I had one where you could take the 3 and bounce it down to the 1 track, and then you would open up those 3 tracks for
Yeah,
new tracks. After you did that once or twice, you would suddenly start hearing, and I guess it was just all the harmonics in the tape and everything just saturating. But it would be
yeah,
like, there's like a new instrument going on here. You'd hear things that weren't originally
yeah,
there. And you don't get that, in the
yeah.
computer, all your tracks are so isolated and separate. They don't interact. But on the tape, if you play something too loud on one track, it like gets it onto the next track, and you can't even get rid of it at that
Yeah,
point. There's some magical stuff that would
yeah,
happen.
and that, yeah, and that sort of 4 track basis, it's like a band: the drummer, the bass player, the guitarist, the vocals. Or
Hmm.
you can only bounce so much, like you say, and then it starts bleeding. So I took
Hmm.
that approach a little bit when I was writing those early tracks,
Mm.
but then later on you get spoiled and you're up to 25 tracks, and there's no right or wrong, really, is there?
No, no, definitely not. But I think it's important sometimes to figure out like a method that works, because you can work on a track
Yeah,
forever, right? I mean, you can always try something new in there. Let's do this, let's do that, let's put this effect on there, see what that does. And you can get lost in that for quite some
yeah.
time.
That sort of tells me something what I used to do. I used to mess around with MIDI in Reason for hours and have 10 versions of a track. And then eventually I worked out, just record it live. And then you're stuck with it. And then you've got to make that work. And then that's your drum track. You can add and maybe do some little tricks in live. But that was it. I'd done albums like that, where it was like, right, that whole track's going to stay as it is because I've recorded it off of the synth. And like you say, imperfections and all, it might be a bit hot, might be a bit quiet. You can do some tricks, but that's it. Now stick to it, because otherwise you're just playing with MIDI for 3 weeks and you're not really getting anywhere. Sometimes the best version is done in the first hour.
Yeah, I find a lot of times in the early stages, like that's where like 80% of it happens. The vision happens, the idea, and everything else after that is a lot more of like a process, refining, polishing, and you can get lost in that forever.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a project I'd done, Gina Calabrese. They put the album out of that. It's another like little side project of mine. And I was just using rack stuff. I can't even remember. I think I used an M1 or something like that. And I was using more of a 90s sound, but I just made it really Miami Vice. And just recorded the tracks down. And some of my early stuff was like that, because I was muting it and soloing it on the mixing desk and just recording the take, twiddling the knobs a little bit. And then just, that's the bass line done. Now I've got to play around it. Like that band interaction. The bass player's playing what he's playing, the guitarist. You've got to make it work.
I like that way of thinking of it, because you can always add another part and say, oh, well, I'm doing this now, so let's go back and change the bass. Let's go fix the drums here so it does that. And I often get in this like loop of never really moving forward.
Yeah.
But when something is put down, then you make those decisions. I'm going through that right now, recording music with two of my buddies, 3-piece rock band style. And we have been like making these songs up, and they're sort of like abstract in a way, where sometimes I play it like this, sometimes I play it like that. And every guy is doing that. Sometimes the drummer does this, sometimes he does that. So when we play live, we have this sort of like, I think of it as like a cloud. It's not well defined, but the song is there. But once we started recording it and we heard the drum part, we're like, well, that's the part we have to play to now. And that just focused every other part that went down.
Yeah. One of my first studio times I played bass live with one of my first bands, I was probably 16, 17. And the guy, the engineer, he said, you're playing it different every time. I said, that's just how I play. I just play. And then that's how it feels to what I'm playing. Because I can't remember it, pretty much, you know. But, I just played different every time. It was driving him mad. So it is good. And that's kind of the thing I liked with MIDI and hardware and things like that. It's there. It's dialed in. You can't do that on a bass guitar. You can't get that same velocity, and you got to really concentrate and you know. Whereas with MIDI and software and that, you can get it exact the same time, total recall. And then that's later on, I got it more into the analog and stuff, because it is doing that slop and that sort of playing you around a bit, and it will inspire you a little bit more, or make the track more interesting.
Yeah, you're getting the variation out of just the inconsistencies of the hardware.
Yeah. Like a digital drum machine would just be 4/4 every time, but something like an 808 will start doing its own thing and giving its own life.
Right, a little drift here and there, and tonal changes.
But Ableton's got that in there now. It's got all that sort of randomization, and I quite like some of that self-generative music as well. And they've got all those sort of Max for Live plugins and things now. They're really handy. Just to twist your hi-hats up a little bit, or, you know, make things move that, say, like a drum machine couldn't do.
What is something you like to do, say, to twist up the hi-hats?
Well, I've been using that a little bit, but not really a lot. I've not really used live a lot recently. I like putting bits of delay on, saturation and little things like that, and just give them a little bit more room, because they can become a bit static. It's, I don't know, horses for courses, sort of, you know. The track usually tells you what to do.
Yes, there's a point where you start to listen to the song instead of telling the song what to do. The song, like, kind of plays you a little bit.
They're the best ones.
In live now, with MIDI, they have like a probability that you can set up for every single MIDI note you put in. So, and I'm such a big fan of that. You can draw in just straight 16th note hi-hats.
I've still not really learned that.
Yeah, it's super cool. Draw in 16th note hi-hats and give them like whatever percentage, 70%. And every time that one bar loop plays, it's different. It just has this like a human that's just like deciding, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And just, it's great. It brings it to life so much. It's one of my favorite features they've added in a long time. Every time I do MIDI now, I throw in a little bit of randomization like that.
Yeah, I think if you sort of keep that to a level and not keep it 0 to 127, and it totally all over the place, if you sort of compact that, just that little variation, the human ear picks up on that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's some great stuff in Ableton.
You give it like, you're allowed to be this random. You can't be this random, but you can be a little bit random. Just enough.
Yeah. And I forget, there was all them, it's in the MIDI section, innit? I've got it open now, the MIDI effects. I use them all the time. They're like a lifesaver. And little things now and again. I'll just drop it up, +12, back to 0, +12, and the same line becomes a life, bit of glide, and it's a combination of the software and the hardware battling each other, you know. And yeah, a lot of my stuff, I don't even really set the syncs and things up right, so sometimes things will be slightly off the yeah I've always been like, I've never really set my sync clocks, which is why sometimes I use one piece at a time, and then I go back and eventually I might nudge them all up to the 0. Yeah, I use little tricks like that sometimes.
Right. So you let the machines kind of go their own way. This machine's 120 BPM is a little bit different than this machine's 120 BPM.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a nice way to like get some of that flavor, that, because it's so easy to edit all of that kind of feeling out if you want to. If you want things to be perfect, it can be. And as soon as there's some weird point where once it gets to it, it just stops feeling good. It's too good. It's too perfect. It's a tricky spot to...
Yeah. Well, there was a point as well, if you listen to some of my stuff, I quantize everything, almost like craft work. That is like on the money, sort of, it's regimented, you know? And there's a place for that, and then something else can swing around that and get the groove. And
that creates some nice interplay too.
Exactly. And yeah, simplicity sometimes. We are spoiled in what we've got.
I agree. That's something I've appreciated about your music, is there's obviously depth to it, but there's not so much happening all the time. There's always something to kind of focus on, and it kind of, things tend to weave in and out. But there is obviously the capability of, like you said, you can do 700 tracks, you have no limit. And I think that a lot of times the more you add, the less you hear of everything that's there. You lose the ability to pay attention to anything. It just becomes one giant thing. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of room in your tracks to just like appreciate the sounds that you have.
I think as well it's sometimes choice of synths or,
Mm-hmm.
and then some of my stuff I get stuck in a rut sometimes, and I know how to make my tracks, so I think, oh, can I do this? Can I do that? But then I'll just make some noise music or something. I do things like that sometimes, tape loops. I'm into all sorts. I think as long as you just keep inspiring yourself, that will come back round at some point. You'll go,
Right.
that's an 80s Stallone track. Sometimes I'll make things for months and it sounds nothing like what people are used to.
Mm-hmm. So, what brought you to the 80s Stallone whole aesthetic? I mean, that's definitely a fun part of what you're doing. Like the sound has this nice like throwback feeling, but there's a sense of humor going on with all of the like Sylvester Stallone references and art that you use in your music.
Uh, I've always sort of said I had like the Rocky games and the Rambo games on the Sega, and I used to
Uh-huh.
watch the films when I was a kid and see all, and had the soundtrack on tape. So I had the Rocky 4 soundtrack, I think, which had all the, you know, the big tracks, and he was
Yeah.
really laying it
Big
out there then.
montage. Yeah.
But I'm not a massive fan. Yeah, you know, it sort of screams that sort of 80s action hero thing. And
Mm.
yeah, I just think I just thought of the name. I said, yeah, 80s Stallone, that'll do.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, there's some slight references, but nothing major, you know. Like I say, I've
Mm-hmm.
done a Miami Vice thing as well with Gina
Mm-hmm.
Calabrese, and
Mm-hmm.
that actually got picked up before the 80s Stallone stuff
Mm.
because a record label put out Hotline, which was with Time Slave, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, they done good with that because they sort of loved the album, and it was 10 years old nearly. I think it
Mm.
is 10 years old, a couple of months' time. So they picked it up and said, we're going to put it out. I said, yeah, cool.
Not bad. Yeah.
But I'd already had another album, which was unknown. But they didn't even know it was me.
Well, there's certainly a mystique to what you're doing. There's not a lot of info on you or much of anything really. It's just kind of this, um, and I like that about it. You know, I think that's a cool thing to be able to do these days, to like have like an artist who is like mysterious and like, what's going on here? You know, where did this come from? Is that something you've like actively tried to do? Is that a
I thought it would be better for the music to just do what it's saying, and
Mhm.
people who are into that scene will just pick up on it, whether they like it or not. I don't really
Mm.
need to know about me as such.
Mhm.
And yeah, it was kind of conscious. So I can remember seeing Daft Punk before they had the masks and all that stuff, and I understood what they were doing at the time. They masked up and said, "Listen to the music," and then they blew
Mm.
completely up. I used to go and see like Chemical Brothers. Loads of people would be like DJing around London, and you'd see them in the early days, and then they got massive, and they were using all hardware, and that's kind of inspired me a bit because I was playing in punk bands and not really listening to dance music at that point. Although I'd listened to it as a kid, once I saw these guys later on, I thought, oh, you know, the French house scene, and a lot of it
Mm.
came from that. And then synthwave evolved into something else. Although it existed in the 80s, people don't really hark back to that, the synth pop and all these different movements. But yeah, I was also into like a lot of noise music and things like that. And it's same with the punk. It's a DIY thing. It's like just do it
Mhm.
yourself, just do it, and don't worry about like the fame and the fortune. Leave that to the A team. You know, that's their job.
Yeah. Right. I think you get the punk philosophy going with like people working on their own, getting their boxes, their gear, whatever it is, and pumping out their tunes without any kind of worry about any of that sort of stuff. I'm just doing it myself.
That is definitely the 80s hardcore attitude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And the internet allowed us to do that.
it did. Yeah. One of the major changes it's brought forth, right?
You could set your own labels up. You could just do your own thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. It's amazing how we can get music out. I mean, across the world instantly. From coming from
Yeah.
the days of putting my demo tape in like a 2 double cassette deck, you know, what do they call them? Like dual cassette deck,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
play, record at the same time. And that's how we produced and distributed our music, one at a time in real time.
Yeah.
Wow. Like now, unbelievable what we can do too. What a change, huh?
That's how I done a lot of my early stuff. I done one when I was at school. I done it on the 4-track. I lent the school's 4-track. Lent everything I had. And I had my drum machine, done vocals, and I just gave them out to all the kids in school. And that became a little bit of a legendary album. And from there I thought forwards. When we got the CDRs, we could just burn them and give them away. I've never really been an entrepreneur to sell all my stuff. I just kind of think if people like it, they like it. Much like yourself, how you found me.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out exactly how I found you, but it's been a while now, and it was just it stuck out. You know, I think it hit it at a good time. I'm getting into like synths myself, and you know, finally like deciding I wanted hardware, and hearing your music was inspiring. It was like, oh, listen to like this cool stuff you can make, you know, and but man, I don't know where it popped up in my world. Just kind of found me, I think.
It's a myth to me.
Yeah.
It's a myth to me as well. Yeah, but it's become its own genre as such.
Yeah.
I think I opened an Arturia synth or something, and it had a synthwave preset or something. And I thought, well, there you go.
That's funny. So you just put out a new collection of tunes, Engaged.
Yep.
So is this a compilation of newer stuff, older stuff? There were a couple I definitely recognized from the past. But so what's the story with this release here?
I literally had a folder, like you say, an old folder, and it was just tracks that people were saying, these are the ones we all know, we like. And I just put it out. A friend of mine, Glenn, he put together the artwork, and I just put it out that night. Like you say, it was instant. So I just dropped that on SoundCloud, or Bandcamp, I should say. But it is all tracks from SoundCloud. They've all been heard. And it's just stuff I haven't re-released. I thought, let's just do a new one.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm definitely happy
I've
to see it.
got about 10 albums. Yeah, I've got about another 10, but yeah. I just thought they're the ones people would like, you know?
Yeah.
So...
Are you planning on putting any of the other stuff out?
Yeah, I will do at some point. It's sort of like the concepts, or how do I package it? What do I do with it? Who wants it? No one. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, it's as long as I'm happy with it, then it's cool, sort of thing. We might see a physical release of it some point.
Nice.
But I'm not too stressed. I'm just glad people like it.
Yeah. I love you're just so laid back about it, you know, and for someone that's like so relaxed about like what happens with his music, it's like it's getting out there and people are listening to it. You got a lot of people following you, subscribe to you, you know. I just think it's really cool that it's a great example of just the music is doing the talking, you know?
I hope so.
Yeah. It's like it's got this like mind of its own and it's just getting out there. You just need to let it go. You need to like
Yeah.
free it like a bird.
Yeah. Like, I'm always working,
Hmm.
and I'm working on music. But that's what I've always said. As long as people like it,
Mm.
then I'm happy to make it, sort of thing, or release it. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's always hard, isn't it? To I suppose I'm not trying to be something, or you know, or do something that's not right.
Right.
If it's right, it'll come to the top, sort of
Mhm.
like the cream, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a cool approach, you know, because you can definitely kind of like ruin your art by trying to force it and trying to make it fit certain things and get it done at a certain time. I mean, these a lot of times those are really useful things to keep us motivated, but it can also be the very thing that destroys it. So I like how you're sort of protective of
Yeah,
that. Hmm. That's very
yeah.
punk rock of you,
There you go.
right? Where do you like to send people when you tell them about your music? Is it Bandcamp, SoundCloud? Is there anywhere else? There, if people write in 80s Stallone, they'll find you, of course. But
Where do I
yeah,
put it? Pretty much, or they'll find a picture of Sylvester Stallone.
yeah,
But yeah, I'd say Bandcamp really, and SoundCloud I use more as a promo sort of thing.
uh huh,
I just put something on there which is totally different.
mm.
Sometimes I put some of my other projects, and they might get a few hundred plays, but I'm happy to just get a tester and see if people like it.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm not with any labels or anything, 'cause like you say, then you get pressure. Then they
Right.
want another album that sounds like the one before. And
Hmm.
that'll come in my own time, you know?
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I'm glad you're staying true to your art and your vision and having fun with it. I love the entire sensibility of everything. The Sylvester Stallone artwork. I even love that you got on your Bandcamp. You've got a picture of Charlie Sheen. I think that was from the movie Hot Shots, parodying Rambo. Is your
Yeah,
art? I love it. Great touch. You know, it and it's not like you listen to the music and um, that stuff interferes with it anyway. It's a nice addition to it. It just gives it another dimension to appreciate. And I think you've found a nice balance of calling this like
yeah,
nostalgic
thanks.
stuff to
Thanks.
mind.
It means a lot.
Yeah, yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's
Yeah, it
been
does
really
mean a lot,
popular.
you know?
You know, it's been really popular with my group of friends. You know, we all enjoy what you're doing very much, and um, I'm just happy that you're still doing it, that you're enjoying it, and you're um, staying true to yourself. You know, you're not letting anything get in the way. I think that's really noble and something to appreciate because a lot of times once things start get you know picking up some steam, like you said, you know, the label can ruin it for you. They can pressure you, and that's clearly not the path you're taking.
No. No, it should be fun for everyone, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I'm having fun with it, and I appreciate what you're doing. It's great work.
Good stuff, man.
So cool. So I will direct people to 80sstallone.bandcamp.com, and I'll put this in my show notes so people can see it. They can find you. And I do encourage anyone
Yeah,
listening,
cool.
go check it out. It's good stuff. If you need a good workout or you want some good party music, I think this will fit the mood very nicely.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Yeah, so we'll say goodbye to everybody and we'll wrap it up. So thanks everyone for listening. Please check out 80sstallone.bandcamp.com and enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.